Welcome back, everybody, to part 6 of the TLDR of Life course on YouTube. I'm just going to continue reading from my blog post, which I've been answering the second life domain question so far of why do I believe what I believe. So if you haven't seen parts 1 through 5 yet, I'd recommend watching that as well as the previous lessons as well. So without further ado, let's dig into this and start reading from my blog posts. So why do I believe that I'm going to do something that's never been done before? March 25th. Why do I believe that I'm going to and want to do something that's never been done before in my career? From a more recent perspective, in the last few years, I'm already doing things that I don't see many or any others doing overall at my age, or at least not in my circles of influence. So there's evidence that I already have done some of this stuff. But this is only the last 2 to 3 years when I've started to think and act for myself. I also feel strong about my intuition and conviction of it in pretty much any situation. So I just trust it and myself more. Part of trusting and knowing myself more is knowing that I'm a creator, in many senses of the word. I'm always fulfilled when I go from nothing to something. So maybe my expertise is in getting people, organizations, and others to take that first step, to trust their instincts. Trying to find the deeper reasons for the belief. I think it's similar to another one of my beliefs of my childhood. For this belief starts when I graduated and started working. In my actual childhood, I was told I had lots of potential in whatever I wanted to do. I guess though, since it was a part of me, I never fully understood it, and maybe I still don't. A couple of tangential paths here. 1, how do I quantify potential? 2, how does potential get transferred to realized? And 3, isn't there always something that we can learn from? I'll answer the last one first. If I believe the macrocosm is the microcosm, and vice versa, then aren't all the metaphors that we derive value from didactic in some manner? Couldn't I argue that every single thing not only has a potential lesson in it, but has to have at least one lesson in it? The microcosm of that individual experience with the macrocosm of our life. Some people relate to the universe in many different ways. I think some people boil down the macrocosm into the microcosm. Some people boil up the microcosm into the macrocosm. That's just their ways of relating to the world. The stories and metaphors all symbolize something. So what are they symbolizing? The bigger picture. Something larger than what that original story or metaphor's scope was. All I'm doing with my way of thinking is observing and examining the world and relating it as a conduit to understand myself. Some people inspect themselves first as a way to understand the world. And everyone falls somewhere along the spectrum. Relating it to the point, though, in whatever we take a look at, if we believe the smaller picture is a reflection of the larger picture in every instance, then you can look at anything to understand anything else. With that perspective, there is the potential to learn about anything just by learning about something. Relating the one-to-one mindset with this, if we believe that we learn one thing and apply it only in that context, then learning is a linear growth rate. It's fine and forward-moving, but it's not the most that we have the capability of. If we graduate through the levels of one to many, many to one, to a many to many relationship thinking, then growth can be exponential. Even within exponential growth, though, there can be different bases, exponents, coefficients. So in this case, what is a quantifiable way to express a fixed mindset? A fixed mindset is something to the first power. So 3 to the 1, 4 to the 1, 5 to the 1, etc. It doesn't really matter what the base is because it's always going to be that number. Or I guess as a function of time. It's going to stay constant. Actually, the extreme end is that the exponent, for example, the x in 5 to the x could be 0. Then it actually doesn't matter what the base is because it'll always be 1 as the answer. 3 to the 0 equals 1, 5 to the 0 power equals 1, 100 to the 0 power equals 1. We could keep going on this end of the spectrum, actually, with 5 to the negative 1 equals 1/5, which is 0.2. 10 to the negative 1 equals 1/10, and so on. This could be the inverse of a growth mindset, a decaying mindset. So here, I think the base is how strongly we believe in our beliefs. Because if we have a very strong belief, let's quantify that as 100. But if it's a decaying mindset, then 100 to the negative 1 power equals 1/100th, or 0.01. Whereas a light decaying mindset could be 2 to the negative 1 equals 0.5, which is small, but still 50x the 100 to the minus 1 person. So in this case, the base is the strength of our beliefs, and the exponent is the mindset that we have. So if from the range of minus infinity to 0 is a decaying mindset, and 0, 0 is a fixed mindset, then 0 to infinity is a growth mindset. So then the next questions are, what determines our base, and what determines the exponent? If it's the strength or conviction of our beliefs for the base, then it's the identity, beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, continuous circle that impacts the base. Thousands of pieces of material have been created on this, so no need to go further there on this for this scope. Then the exponent could be our belief on the one-to-one relationship. If we think of a one-to-one relationship, then the exponent may be 0. I think it could also be 1. But progressing towards a many-to-many relationship, the exponent gets higher and higher. The more individual relationships we see within that many-to-many relationships, the higher the exponent. The other thing here is to apply the microcosm of the macrocosm principle mathematically. I was having trouble distinguishing the beliefs generally, the base, from the one-to-one / many-to-many relationship spectrum, or the exponent. If there's one law of karma, then everything is the effect of a cause, and itself the cause of an effect in the future. So in that case, the exponent is the base for the next term, and the base is the exponent for the subsequent term, and so on. So you have an infinity chain of bases and exponents. Our beliefs are shaped by our decaying fixed growth mindset, and our decaying fixed growth mindset is shaped by our beliefs. So it's kind of a circle there. So where does that leave us? What if we try to go all the way to the bottom or all the way to the top? I think at the theoretical bottom, the base is 1. That would align with the thinking of God is 1. At the beginning, there was only 1, etc. Well, it doesn't really matter what's at the top of this infinity chain, because the base dictates it all. If it's 0, then the answer is 0. If it's 1, then the answer is 1. I'm inclined to say 1, and that 1 is the higher power that we all call different names. If it was 0, then there wouldn't be anything. But there's at least this hologram projection, what we call Earth and life, so there must be something greater than 0. The thing is, in the physical plane of life, we're so focused on a specific set of bases and exponents that we lose track of the larger picture, that if we boil it down at the beginning or the end, it's still only 1. I'm missing the element of time, though, here. How often do the bases and exponents change? Just add t for time in the equation. So b to the xt power. So the faster you learn, you can learn in many different ways, the higher the rate of growth will be. Well, actually, wait. How do we fit in my belief of the balanced growth mindset? Is it the inverse of time? Instead of t, it's 1 over t? Because if we go at too fast of a rate, then we're caught up in an unhealthy growth mindset without actually growing from it. So then I'm actually thinking it's actually y equals b to the x over t power. So is this the equation for our potential? How does it get realized? I think by simply moving along time-wise, it'll naturally get realized. T for time will always be going forward, so we don't have to force anything to realize our potential. Just have the right beliefs and mindset, and it'll all happen at the right pace. Everyone's beliefs and mindsets will be different, right? So the rate of realization of potential for each person will be different. There is no right speed or rate. It's finding the rate that best serves you instead of you serving it. So relating this to my career, the career is just a context to learn what we spend a disproportionate amount of our time. It'll impact our beliefs perhaps the most, at least of our adult lives. We've tried as a society to determine what these correct numbers should be, with the B and X and even the T. But let's get rid of all that to just have the right mindset. But let's let go of all that to just have the right mindset, and everything will work out just fine over time. So a picture at the bottom here of this infinity chain, right? But with the base, the original base being 1, so it doesn't really matter what everything else is here, because the answers are also going to be 1. All right, going on to the next blog post, next journal day that I had, titled, "Why Do I Believe That My Career Will Always Be a Place to Try Out New Ideas?" from March 29th. Why do I believe that my career will always be a place to try out new ideas? In very large part, due to 2U. I'm not sure if I thought about it or even believed this prior to joining 2U. I think I believed that ideas would have to be fully fleshed out and formally presented to get any sort of buy-in. But maybe the best way to get buy-in from others is not through a presentation, but through a demonstration. Don't tell, show. I think I believed ideas had to be some crazy big things, but everyone has small ideas all the time, quote unquote small. And when we look back, it's those small things that had the biggest impact. I believe this simply because I've lived and experienced it. That if I have an idea, I can execute it. Is that the definition of autonomy? The path of least resistance from ideation to implementation. The less the time and fewer the quantity and magnitude of the blocks from those two endpoints, the greater the autonomy. Autonomy equals something over time from implementation minus ideation times the blocks, or the quantity of blocks times the magnitude of the blocks. So, what's on top of this equation? What do I have to do more of that gives me more autonomy? It's brainstorming decision-making power, responsibility, authority. I think similar concepts. So, decision-making power over the time from implementation minus ideation times the sum of the blocks of magnitude from I equals 1 to n. And I was using summation notation here, so kind of looks awkward in text. The thing is to increase autonomy as a whole. You can only increase decision-making power of someone only so much. You have to spend more time reducing the time it takes from ideation to implementation, or reducing the magnitude of the blocks. The summation notation here makes more sense compared to purely a product. So what are all the potential blocks that may be there? Money, people, systems or processes, current feasibility, execution process steps, bandwidth, intentions. Well, actually, most of these things could actually enable more autonomy as well, if you have the right amount of them. Because decision-making power is a function of the organizational structure and approval process. So how do I quantify both the value added and lost with one of these factors? What's the proper scale here? The n number should be between -1 to 1 inclusive, or minus 100 to 100% autonomous. So then you have all these factors. And then I was thinking, is the scale really -1 to 1, or is it just 0 to 1? All right, so let's say for the factors I did this, then the maximum would be 7, and the minimum would be -7. So the autonomy then here equals the sum of the autonomy factors net score from I equals 1 to n over n. So I have an equation down below which I'll show you. Where the net score, which I mentioned here, is how much of us on a scale of -1 to 1 that the factor is contributing to autonomy. Actually, to make it just simpler, because what does it mean to be -100% autonomous? the scale has to be adjusted from -1 to 1 to 0 to 1. So the maximum would be 7 and the minimum 0 in this case. So then let's say when you run the equation, you get 4/7 or 0.57, let's say. Then you multiply that by 100 to get your autonomy percentage from 0 to 100%, which would be 57% autonomous. Always bringing math into this. How far can I go with this? Create quantifiable definitions for common words? That'd be pretty fun, honestly. So here's my brainstorming initially with the blank term over the time it takes from implementation to ideation times the blocks times the blocks quantity and magnitude. But then adding in a few layer here of decision-making power, and then turning it into summation notation with the magnitude of the blocks, but then updating it to just be the net score of the autonomy factors all summed up between 0 and 1 for each of the 7 factors that I listed out over n. So then you're getting somewhere in between 0 and 1, and you multiply it by a percentage to get somewhere between a 0 and 100%. So that's autonomy right there, figured out mathematically. So those are the only 2 blog posts that I will be reading today, but you can see that I'm going deep, figuring out ways to quantify different words, different concepts within my career, and things that can be applied outside the career domain as well. So hopefully, if you're following along, you're going as deep as I am here, and using your intuition to guide you, whether it's writing, whether it's reading, whether it's through typing, to answer this life domain question of why do I believe what I believe about your first life domain that you chose. So thank you for listening and watching and potentially reading part 6 of this lesson 5 of the TLDR of Life YouTube course, and I'll see you next time.